Hi. So licks that you can actually use, incorporate into your playing for the Grevious Angel. So you're doing the bass drum style. And you know with the C, to go to that bass drum style just for a second, you know with the C you can either do the 5th string, 4th string, or 5th string, low E string, either moving the 3rd finger or doing the 4-finger C shape. Good to have a listen to the bass player to get that, because the bass player is often doing this boom, 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 and then you can hear the bass player doing these bass runs, as they call it, which is moving you from one chord to the other. So instead of just going G, C, G, D, sort of one static chord at a time, the bass player is joining the dots, if you like, and going. He's doing these little runs, which you can incorporate into your playing if you have the time, because you have to establish the chords. So you have to be on the chord 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This song might be, you're not spending a lot of time on each chord to fit these in, but I'll just show you the basic ones so that you can use it in this song if you can fit it in. If you feel like fitting it in, it's a matter of taste. And of course, then not just this song, any song. And of course, most country songs use this bass drum style, and so they also do the bass runs. And a lot of folk music uses that as well. It's just it sounds different. That would be a more folky feel, but you can see I'm doing the same thing. I'm in bass drum style and the bass movement. So where are these notes coming from? Well, like I said in the last video, these chords come from, G, C, D, E minor, B minor. They all come from the scale of G. So if we know the scale of G, which we did in the last video, 3, 0, 2, 3, 0, 2, 4, 0, 2, 0, 1, 3, 0, 2, 3. If we know that, then we can make the runs, because the bass runs are using those notes, because those are the notes that are going to fit, because those are the notes that will harmonize with the chords, because those notes are from G major, and so are the chords. Yeah, they're all from that scale. So your typical run from G to C, normal G, pluck that, 3rd fret of the low E string, then open A, and then 2nd fret of the A string. So you're basically taking your 1st finger off in position and in the chord position, then putting it back on. And then your next note is the root note of the C. So you've gone 3rd fret, 0, 2, 3 of the A string. From C to D, various things you can do, because you've got notes to choose from. You've got a scale, and you can choose different notes of those scale to get from one chord to the other. There are several different routes, if you like. So a typical one, probably the easiest, is just you're on your C chord, and again, lowest note of the C chord, then open D string, 2nd fret D string, and then you go to D, and then you've just got open D string for your root note. So that'll sound like. And D is another one where you can either go in your alternating bass in your alternating bass notes. You can either go from D string to G string or D string to A string. Why does that sound fine? Because that A note is actually in the chord. It's in the chord of D. It's just usually you don't want it as the lowest note of the D, yeah, because otherwise it won't quite sound like D. But briefly, as in this style, if the lowest note is A just briefly, then that's okay. So that was G to C, C to D. Coming back from D to C. If you think of the timing, usually 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you might take a whole bar to get to that next chord. If you were doing that, a typical thing to do, this probably won't fit into this song so much, but a typical thing to do would be D, open D string, 3rd fret A, 2nd fret A, open A string, and then you're on your C chord. Dun, 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 dun. Bum, 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 bum. And that from C to G, same principle, lowest note of the C chord, then 2nd fret A string, open A string, 2nd fret E string, and then that brings me to that lowest note of the G chord, which is 3rd fret E string. So what are the chord changes you got? You do have G to C and you got G to D. Getting from G to D. Of course, you just can pick any notes in the scale and see if you like the sound of it. But a typical one going from G to D: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So that was G. E string 3rd fret, open A string, 2nd fret A string, 3rd fret A string, and then open D for your D chord. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's one chord in this song which isn't in the scale of G. What's it doing there? It's making things more interesting. It's the A7. If you're in the scale of G, the A chord would be an A minor chord, yeah? But they've turned it into a dominant 7. I think in the paper, in the sheet, it says just A, but actually in the band you can hear it's A7 because the lead guitar plays a flat 7 over it, so it makes it an A7. And what that is called is a secondary dominant. So any chord from a scale you can turn into a dominant 7th chord, and that's a way composers. That's one thing composers use to change key, because it's kind of like those things you have on railway tracks which change the direction of the tracks. Yeah, when you get a dominant 7th chord, it's such a powerful sound that the ear is trained to hear it go in a certain way. And so if you make any chord from your harmonized major scale, if you make any chord a dominant 7, it's like you've suddenly created a crossroads where you can then go in other directions and not just stay in the key you're in, but go into other keys. Having said all that, we only stay in that key very briefly. It's just A7 leads us as a secondary dominant to D. The next chord is D, or D7. And I won't get into why that works now. But when you're on that A chord, I'm going to make this lesson all about the bass drum style. But when you're on that A chord, of course you can go A string, D string, or A string, E string, A string, E string. Yeah? And yes, and the only other chord I think you have is a B minor, and I think that covers all the chords. Now, you can actually hear the bass do. It does the Yeah, the root note, 2nd fret A string, and then that note, 2nd fret E string. Yeah. Now, 2 ways of doing this. You could bar your B minor and have your first finger across all the strings, and then you wouldn't have to move the finger at all, and you just go A string, E string. Or you could do that thing that I said of having the chord like this, and you're just fretting that A string and you're not doing a bar. If you're doing that, then you just move the first finger as if you're on a C chord, moving your 3rd finger, yeah? Yes, so because I've kind of there's one more thing that I wanted to do about bass runs, because this whole thing has turned into the bass notes. So when you hear this bit of the song, when it goes from G over F sharp to E minor, then you spend some time on E minor and then your next chord is C. Yeah? Well, you can hear the bass player going G, F sharp, E, then he goes down to the note D, but we can't get there because that's our lowest note, but we can put the note D here, and then he goes to the note C. So if I do that up here, he's basically going, yeah, so he's just descending those notes. They're all in the G major scale, yeah? And he goes, bum, 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 bum. So if I now put that into our chord progression, well, we've already got G, F sharp, E. There's our D note, okay? So let me do that again because I didn't change my chord. G, F sharp, E minor. And to get that D note, I'm just going to change E minor into E minor 7 by taking my 3rd finger off. So I've got G over G, G over F sharp, E minor over D, or E minor 7, and then I go to C. Yeah, so I've got, yeah. Now I don't think the song, then I think the song goes to D, but some songs you'll hear it keep going down. You'll hear G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, and then maybe go to D. So you can incorporate that into any tune that you're playing, yeah. Even if the main thing you're doing is strumming, just for that type of chord progression, you could always go from just strumming yeah, you can always just add it in there in whatever way you want. Depending on the chord progression, of course. Okay, I'll leave that one there, and then in the next video I'll actually get onto some licks. Okay, right, hope that helped.